The gunshot that killed Caleb Porter's father echoed through his memory every single day. And the man who pulled that trigger 15 years ago had a daughter with eyes that could bring a sunrise to shame. Caleb stood outside the saloon in Valentine, Nebraska, watching the dust settle on the main street as another scorching afternoon bore down on the prairie town. It was 1876, and the wounds of old conflicts still festered in places like this, where families remembered every slight, every betrayal, every drop of blood spilled. The Porters and the Everetts had been at war since before Caleb could properly hold a rifle, back when his father and Josephine Everett had been business partners in a cattle venture that ended with accusations of theft, violence, and ultimately, his father's death. Caleb was 24 now, built strong from years of ranch work, with sun-darkened skin and hands that knew the weight of both a rope and a pistol. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he adjusted his hat, his jaw set in that same stubborn line his mother always said would get him killed someday. The Porter Ranch sprawled across the northern edge of the county, while the Everett spread dominated the southern territory. They avoided each other at all costs, conducting business in different towns, attending different churches, living separate lives in a county that was barely big enough for one family, let alone two feuding clans. But then Josephine Everett rode into town that afternoon, and everything Caleb thought he knew about hatred began to crumble. She came down the street on a chestnut mare, sitting tall in the saddle with a grace that made even the hardened cowboys stop their conversations and stare. Her auburn hair was pinned up beneath a simple hat, and she wore a modest blue dress that somehow seemed to catch every ray of sunlight. Caleb knew who she was immediately. He had seen her from a distance before, at territorial fairs and cattle auctions, always surrounded by her brothers and father, always kept at a careful distance from any Porter. She dismounted in front of the general store, and Caleb found himself unable to look away. There was something different about her, something that set her apart from the brittle anger that defined both their families. When she turned slightly, he saw her face properly for the first time. She was young, probably around 22, with delicate features that belied what must be a strong constitution to survive in this harsh land. Her eyes, even from this distance, held a warmth that seemed impossible given whose blood ran through her veins. Caleb told himself to walk away. He told himself to mount his horse and ride back to the ranch, to forget he had ever seen her, to remember that she was an Everett and that made her his enemy by birthright. But his boots remained planted on the wooden sidewalk, and when she emerged from the store carrying a heavy crate, his body moved before his mind could stop it. "Let me help you with that," he said, reaching for the crate. Josephine looked up at him, and for a moment, time seemed to suspend itself. Her eyes were green, flecked with gold, and they widened slightly as recognition dawned. She knew who he was. Of course she did. Everyone in the county knew the faces of their enemies. "I can manage," she said, her voice softer than he expected. There was no venom in it, no inherited hatred. "Just caution." "I know you can," Caleb replied, surprising himself with his persistence. "But these streets are uneven, and that crate looks like it has got glass inside. Would be a shame to lose it." She studied him for a long moment, and he could see the internal debate playing out behind her eyes. Accept help from a Porter. Her father would be furious if he found out. But there was also something else there, a spark of curiosity, maybe even recognition that they were both trapped in a conflict neither of them had started. "All right," she said finally, releasing her grip on the crate. "Thank you." Their fingers brushed as he took the crate from her, and Caleb felt something electric pass between them. He carried it to her horse, securing it carefully in her saddlebag while she watched with an expression he could not quite read. "I am Caleb," he said, knowing it was foolish to introduce himself when she already knew exactly who he was. "Josephine," she replied, and a small smile played at the corners of her lips. "Though I suppose we both know that already. I suppose we do." He stepped back, giving her space to mount her horse. "Ride safe." She nodded, swinging up into the saddle with practiced ease. For a moment she looked down at him, and he thought he saw something like regret in her expression. Then she turned her horse and rode out of town, leaving Caleb standing in the street wondering what madness had possessed him. Over the following weeks, Caleb found excuses to be in Valentine more often than necessary. He told himself it was coincidence, but he knew the truth. He was hoping to see her again, and the universe, in its strange wisdom, seemed determined to grant his unspoken wish. The second time they met was at the creek that marked the boundary between Porter and Everett land. Caleb had ridden out to check on some stray cattle when he saw her sitting on a large rock near the water's edge, her boots off and her feet dangling in the stream. Her horse grazed nearby, and she seemed lost in thought, staring at the rushing water with an expression of such melancholy that it made his chest ache. He should have ridden away. Every instinct told him to avoid this, to preserve the fragile peace that existed between the families, a peace built on mutual avoidance rather than any real reconciliation. But he found himself dismounting and walking toward her instead. She heard his footsteps and turned, and this time when recognition crossed her face, there was no surprise. It was almost as if she had been expecting him or perhaps hoping for him. "This is dangerous ground for both of us," she said as he approached. "I know." He stopped a respectful distance away. "I can leave if you want." "Do you want to leave?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with all the implications neither of them wanted to voice. Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone who was just as trapped as he was, just as tired of carrying a burden that was not theirs to bear. "No," he said honestly. "I do not want to leave." Josephine's expression softened and she gestured to the rock beside her. "Then stay. Just for a little while. We can pretend for a moment that we are just two people by a creek." Caleb sat down, careful to maintain some distance between them, and for a long while neither of them spoke. The water rushed past, and birds called from the cottonwood trees, and the world continued on as if this moment was not potentially changing everything. "I am sorry about your father," Josephine said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know that probably means nothing coming from me, but I am. I was only 7 when it happened, but I remember the grief that settled over our house. Not grief for what my father had done, but fear of what would come next. We have all been living in that fear ever since." Caleb felt his throat tighten. No Everett had ever acknowledged his father's death before, let alone apologized for it. "My mother has not been the same since. She smiles sometimes, laughs even, but there is always this shadow behind her eyes, like part of her died that day too." "My father does not speak of it," Josephine continued, "but I have seen him sitting alone at night, drinking whiskey and staring at old photographs. Whatever happened between them, whatever caused it all, I think it haunts him too, though he would never admit it. You know what really happened?" "I have heard my family's version, but I have always wondered about the truth." Josephine shook her head. "I have asked, but my father will not speak of it. Just says that your father betrayed him, stole money that was meant for both of them, and that he had no choice but to defend his honor. But I have never fully believed it. My father is a hard man, proud and stubborn, but I do not think he is a liar, and yet the story never quite made sense to me. My mother says it was your father who stole from the partnership, then killed my father when he confronted him about it." But she also says my father was preparing to dissolve the partnership anyway, that they had grown to hate each other over the course of months. Caleb picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in his hands. Maybe the truth is somewhere in between. Maybe they were both proud, stubborn men who let a disagreement spiral into tragedy. And now we carry it, Josephine said. Their anger, their hatred, their inability to forgive, we carry it like it is ours to bear. What if we did not? The words escaped Caleb before he could stop them. What if we just decided that their grudge died with my father, that we do not have to keep feeding this fire? Josephine turned to look at him fully, and in the afternoon light, she was breathtaking. That is a beautiful dream, Caleb Porter. But you know as well as I do that our families would never allow it. The moment they discovered we had even spoken like this, there would be hell to pay. Then we do not let them find out. You are suggesting we what? Meet in secret. Pretend we do not know each other in town. She laughed, but it was not a mocking sound. It was wistful, tinged with longing. That sounds like a path to heartbreak. Maybe, Caleb admitted, or maybe it is the only path to something better. They fell silent again, but something had shifted between them. An understanding, an acknowledgement that they were both drawn to something that should not exist, something that defied everything they had been taught. I come here sometimes, Josephine said after a while. On Tuesday and Thursday afternoons when I can slip away from the ranch. I tell my brothers I am visiting the Hendersons, the family that lives about 5 miles south. No one questions it. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, Caleb repeated, committing it to memory. That is good to know. She met his eyes and a slow smile spread across her face. I suppose it is. That was how it began. Twice a week, Caleb would ride out to the creek, and Josephine would already be there waiting. They talked about everything and nothing. She told him about her love of reading, how she had taught herself from books her mother had left behind before she passed. He told her about his dreams of expanding the ranch, of breeding better horses, of building something that would outlast the grudges of the past. They learned each other slowly, carefully, like explorers charting unknown territory. Josephine had 3 older brothers, all of them hardened cowboys who worked the Everett ranch with the same grim determination their father demanded. She was expected to marry well, to strengthen some alliance or other, but so far she had refused every suitor who came calling. I will not be traded like cattle, she told Caleb fiercely one afternoon. If I marry, it will be because I choose it, because my heart demands it. Caleb found himself thinking about those words at night, lying in his bed and staring at the ceiling. He thought about what it would mean to choose her, to claim her heart and offer his own in return. It was madness. It was impossible. And yet with each passing week, it felt more and more like the only truth that mattered. Summer gave way to autumn, and their meetings at the creek continued. They grew bolder, sitting closer together, finding excuses to touch. His hand on her back as he helped her down from a rock. Her fingers brushing his as she handed him an apple from her saddlebag. The tension between them built like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and electric. It was late October when everything changed. The leaves had turned gold and crimson, and there was a chill in the air that spoke of the coming winter. Josephine arrived at the creek looking troubled, her usual brightness dimmed by worry. "What is wrong?" Caleb asked immediately. She dismounted and walked straight to him, and for the first time she let herself fall into his arms. He held her instinctively, feeling the tremor that ran through her body. "My father has arranged a marriage for me," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "Robert Sullivan from a ranching family up north. He is 43 years old, widowed with 4 children, and my father thinks it is an excellent match. The wedding is set for December." Caleb felt his world tilt. 2 months. They had 2 months before she would be taken from him, bound to a man she did not love, trapped in a life she did not choose. "No," he said firmly, pulling back to look at her face. "You are not doing this. You said you would not be traded." "What choice do I have?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "If I refuse, my father will disown me. I will have nothing, nowhere to go, and he will make sure no one in the county will help me. He has that kind of power, that kind of reach. You have me." The words came out raw and honest. "Josephine, these past months, getting to know you, I have never felt anything like this before. You are the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thought before I sleep. I do not care about the grudge, about our families, about any of it. I care about you." She looked up at him with those green and gold eyes searching his face. "Caleb, if we do this, if we try to be together, it will destroy both our families. They will never forgive us. We will lose everything." "I know." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "But I will lose more if I let you go. I am not fool enough to think this will be easy. It will be the hardest thing either of us has ever done. But I would rather fight for something real than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been." "I am afraid," she whispered. "So am I." He pressed his forehead to hers. "But I am more afraid of living without you." Josephine's hands came up to grip his shirt, and then she was kissing him, desperate and fierce and full of all the longing they had been holding back for months. Caleb kissed her back with everything he had, pouring all his feelings into this moment, this perfect, terrifying moment where everything changed. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Josephine's expression had transformed. The fear was still there, but it was joined by determination, by a fierce resolve that matched his own. "What do we do?" she asked. "We run," Caleb said. "We get married before your father can stop us, and then we find a way to build a life together. It will not be easy. We might have to leave Nebraska, start fresh somewhere our names do not carry the weight of old grudges. But we do it together." "When?" "Soon. Before your father can make the Sullivan marriage official, we will need a plan, need to be smart about this." His mind was already racing, calculating possibilities. "Meet me here tomorrow, same time. I will have figured out the details by then." She nodded, then kissed him again, softer this time but no less meaningful. "I trust you, Caleb Porter. God help me, but I do." That night, Caleb barely slept. He lay in bed working through every angle, every potential problem. The biggest obstacle was getting Josephine away from the Everett ranch without raising alarm. Her father kept close watch on her, especially now with the wedding approaching. They would need a distraction, a reason for her to be away from the ranch that would not arouse suspicion. The next afternoon, he laid out his plan. "There is a circuit preacher who comes through Omaha every month. He is known for performing quick marriages, no questions asked. If we can get there by this Saturday, we can be married before anyone realizes what is happening." "That is 3 days away," Josephine said. "How do I explain being gone that long? Tell your family you are going to visit your aunt in Lincoln. It is far enough that they would expect you to stay a few days, close enough that it is not unreasonable. Pack light, just what you need. We will buy what else you require once we are settled. And where will we settle? We cannot come back here, not after this. I have been thinking about that." Caleb took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "I have a cousin in Colorado, outside of Denver. He runs a horse ranch and has been trying to get me to come work with him for years. He does not know the Everetts, does not care about Nebraska feuds. We could start fresh there, build something of our own." Josephine was quiet for a moment, and Caleb could see her processing everything, weighing the enormity of what they were about to do. She would be leaving behind her family, her home, everything she had ever known. He was asking her to gamble her entire life on him, on the fragile hope that love could be enough. "All right," she said finally. "I will tell my father I am leaving for Lincoln on Friday morning. I will take the train from Valentine, but instead of going to Lincoln, I will meet you." "Where?" "The old Miller barn, 2 miles east of town. It has been abandoned for years. No one will think to look for us there. We will ride hard for Omaha, get married Saturday morning, and then continue west to Colorado." "Caleb." She squeezed his hand. "If we do this, there is no going back. You understand that? My father will come after us. Your family will disown you. We will be starting with nothing but each other." "I know." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "And I have never been more certain of anything in my life." The next 3 days were agony. Caleb went through the motions at the ranch, helping with the cattle, mending fences, all while his mind was focused on Friday. He packed carefully, taking only what he could carry in his saddlebags. Money he had saved over the years, extra clothes, his father's pocket watch, a few other small items that mattered. He wrote a letter to his mother, trying to explain the unexplainable, asking for her understanding if not her blessing. On Thursday night, he lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside and thought about his father. What would the man think of this? Would he see it as the ultimate betrayal, his son running off with the daughter of his killer? Or would he understand that love was the only thing strong enough to break the cycle of violence and hatred? Caleb liked to think his father would have understood. Before the partnership, before the fighting, his father had been a good man who believed in second chances and new beginnings. Maybe, in some way, this was honoring that man rather than betraying him. Friday morning dawned clear and cold. Caleb went through his usual routine, then made an excuse about checking on some horses in the far pasture. His mother gave him a long look, and he wondered if somehow she knew, if mothers always sensed when their children were about to change their lives forever. But she just nodded and told him to be careful. He rode to the Miller barn with his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. What if Josephine did not come? What if she had changed her mind, decided the risk was too great? What if her father had discovered their plan? But then he saw her horse approaching from the south, and relief flooded through him. She rode up to the barn and he helped her dismount, and for a moment they just held each other, taking comfort in the solid reality of this moment. "I was afraid you would not come," he admitted. "I was afraid you would not be here," she replied. "I suppose we are both fools, the best kind of fools." He kissed her forehead, then pulled back to look at her seriously. "Are you ready for this? There is still time to change your mind. I will not hold it against you if you decide this is too much." "I am terrified," Josephine said honestly. "But I am also more sure of this than I have ever been of anything. I love you, Caleb. I have been fighting it, telling myself it was impossible, but I cannot fight it anymore. I love you, and I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like." "I love you too," Caleb said, and saying the words out loud felt like breaking through to sunlight after years in darkness. "I love you, Josephine Everett, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this choice." They rode hard for Omaha, pushing their horses as much as they dared. They stopped only briefly to rest the animals and grab some food from a small town along the way. Caleb kept watching behind them, expecting to see Everett riders on the horizon, but the landscape remained empty. They reached Omaha on Saturday morning, exhausted and windswept but still determined. The circuit preacher was exactly where Caleb had been told he would be, operating out of a small church on the edge of town. He was an elderly man with kind eyes and no interest in the complicated histories of young couples who came to him. "You want to be married?" he asked, looking between them. "Yes, sir," Caleb said firmly, "as soon as possible." The preacher studied them for a moment, then nodded. Love is a powerful thing worth fighting for. Come inside." The ceremony was simple, just the two of them and the preacher's wife as witness. Caleb did not have a ring, but he promised he would get her one as soon as they could afford it. Josephine said she did not care about rings. She only cared that they were making this promise to each other. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed her with all the joy and relief he felt, and she kissed him back just as fiercely. They were married. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. They stayed in Omaha that night, spending their wedding night in a modest hotel room. Caleb had worried it might be awkward, this first night together, but being with Josephine felt as natural as breathing. They learned each other with gentle touches and whispered words, and when they finally fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, Caleb felt more at peace than he had in years. The next morning, they began the journey to Colorado. It would take them nearly 2 weeks to reach Denver, traveling carefully to preserve their horses and their limited funds. They talked about everything during those long days on the trail. Their hopes for the future, the kind of life they wanted to build, the children they might have someday. "I want at least 3, Josephine said one evening as they sat by their campfire. "Maybe 4, a house full of noise and laughter." "I want them to grow up free of hatred," Caleb replied. "Free of grudges and violence. I want them to know that love is stronger than anything else." "We will teach them that," Josephine said, leaning against his shoulder. "We will show them every day." They were 5 days into their journey when trouble finally caught up with them. Caleb heard the riders before he saw them, and his blood ran cold. He had known this moment might come, had prepared himself for it, but the reality was still terrifying. He turned in his saddle and saw 4 men approaching at a gallop. Even from a distance, he recognized the lead rider, Josephine's oldest brother, Marcus Everett. "Ride," Caleb told Josephine urgently. "Ride hard and do not look back." "I am not leaving you," she said fiercely. "Josephine, please, if they catch us together, this will end badly. If you ride now, you might be able to get away." "No," she reached over and gripped his hand. "We face this together." That was the promise we made. The riders closed in, surrounding them before they could make any attempt at escape. Marcus Everett looked exactly like his father, all hard edges and cold fury. The 3 men with him were ranch hands, all armed, all looking at Caleb like they wanted to kill him where he sat. "Get away from my sister," Marcus said, his voice deadly calm. "She is not your sister anymore," Caleb replied, keeping his own voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "She is my wife." Marcus's expression darkened. "That is not possible. You could not have." "We were married in Omaha 6 days ago," Josephine said, lifting her chin defiantly. "It is done, Marcus, legal and binding. Father will have it annulled. You are coming home, Josie, right now." "No." Josephine's voice was firm. "I am not going anywhere. I chose this, Marcus. I chose Caleb. I love him, and I am not going to let Father's hatred control my life anymore. He killed our uncle," Marcus spat. "The Porters took someone we loved." "That was not Caleb," Josephine shot back. "That was his father, and it was in response to Father killing Caleb's father. When does it end, Marcus? When do we stop this cycle of violence and revenge? I am stopping it now. I am choosing love over hatred." "You are choosing betrayal," Marcus said, but some of the fire had gone out of his voice. He looked at his sister, really looked at her, and Caleb could see the war playing out behind his eyes. Duty to family versus love for his sister. "Please," Josephine said, softer now. "Please, Marcus. Let us go. Tell Father you could not find us. You can say we had too much of a head start, that we disappeared into the wilderness. He will be angry, but he will eventually move on. But if you drag me back, if you force me into that marriage with Sullivan, you will destroy me." "Is that really what you want?" The silence stretched out, tense and fragile. The other three men looked to Marcus for direction, hands near their weapons but not yet drawn. Caleb's own hand hovered near his pistol, prepared to defend Josephine if necessary. Even though he was outnumbered and the odds were not in his favor, finally, Marcus let out a long breath. "You really love him. This is not just rebellion, not just trying to defy father." "I really love him," Josephine said. "More than I thought it was possible to love anyone. He is a good man, Marcus. He is kind and honest, and he treats me like I matter. Is not that what you would want for me?" Marcus looked at Caleb for a long moment, assessing. "You hurt her, and I will hunt you to the ends of the earth. I do not care what your last name is or what our fathers did to each other. You hurt my sister, and you will answer to me." "I understand," Caleb said, "and I give you my word I will spend every day trying to make her happy." Marcus nodded slowly, then turned his horse. "We never found you," he said to his men. "They had too much of a head start. Trail went cold near the Platte River. That is what we tell father." The men looked uncertain, but they followed Marcus's lead. As they prepared to ride off, Marcus looked back at Josephine one more time. "Be happy, Josie. That is all I ever wanted for you." "Thank you," Josephine said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Marcus." And then they were gone, riding back toward Nebraska, and Caleb and Josephine were left alone on the trail once more. She collapsed against him, shaking with relief and emotion, and he held her tight, murmuring reassurances into her hair. "We are safe," he said. "We are safe, and we are together, and everything is going to be all right." They reached Denver 2 weeks later, travel worn and exhausted but still together. Caleb's cousin, Samuel Porter, welcomed them with open arms and no questions. He took one look at them, saw how they held onto each other, and just smiled. "You can stay in the guest cabin until you get your feet under you," Samuel said. "And Caleb, I meant what I said in my letters. I need good help with the horses. Job is yours if you want it." "I want it," Caleb said gratefully. "Thank you, Samuel. You do not know what this means." "I think I do," Samuel replied, glancing at Josephine with warm understanding. "Welcome to Colorado, both of you." The guest cabin was small but comfortable, and it became their first real home together. Caleb worked with Samuel training and breeding horses, and Josephine found work in town helping at the general store. They were not rich by any means, but they had enough to get by, and more importantly, they had each other. Winter came, blanketing Colorado in snow, and they spent long evenings by the fire talking about their future. Caleb was true to his word about the ring, saving every spare penny until he could buy her a simple gold band. When he slipped it on her finger, she cried and told him it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "It is just a ring," he said, embarrassed by her emotional reaction. "It is not just a ring," she corrected. "It is a symbol of everything we fought for, everything we chose. It is a reminder that love is stronger than hatred." By spring, Josephine was pregnant. They had both hoped for it, dreamed of starting their family, but the reality was overwhelming in the best possible way. Caleb found himself seized by protective instincts he had not known he possessed, worrying over Josephine constantly, making sure she was not working too hard or lifting anything heavy. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she would tell him, laughing. But she also seemed to appreciate his attention, his constant care. Their son was born in late autumn of 1877, a healthy baby boy with a powerful set of lungs and a tuft of dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Caleb's father, and when Caleb held his son for the first time, he made a silent promise that this child would grow up knowing only love and acceptance, never the poison of inherited grudges. Josephine was a natural mother, patient and nurturing but also firm when needed. Watching her with their son made Caleb fall in love with her all over again. She sang to Thomas at night, soft lullabies her own mother had sung to her, and Caleb would stand in the doorway listening, his heart so full it ached. They saved their money carefully, and by the time Thomas was 2, they had enough to put down payment on a small piece of land adjacent to Samuel's ranch. It was not much, just 50 acres, but it was theirs. They built a modest house with help from Samuel and some of the other ranchers, and when they finally moved in, Josephine cried happy tears. "We did it," she said, looking around their simple but comfortable home. "We built something real, something that is ours." "We did," Caleb agreed, pulling her close. "And we are just getting started." News from Nebraska reached them occasionally through letters and traveling merchants. Caleb's mother had been heartbroken by his departure, but had eventually come to understand his choice. She wrote to him cautiously at first, then with increasing warmth as she realized he was truly happy. She never mentioned the Everetts, and Caleb did not ask. Josephine's family was more complicated. Marcus wrote to her once, a short letter saying that their father had disowned her completely and forbidden anyone from mentioning her name. But Marcus also said that he thought about her often, hoped she was well, and that maybe someday, when enough time had passed, there could be reconciliation. Josephine kept that letter in a wooden box by her bed, reading it sometimes when she thought Caleb was not looking. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace, was born in 1880. She had her mother's auburn hair and green eyes, and from the moment she could talk, she had opinions about everything. Thomas adored his little sister, taking his role as big brother seriously, always watching out for her. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. Caleb's skill with horses became well known in the region, and people traveled from miles around to buy from him or have him train their animals. Josephine managed the household and finances with impressive skill, somehow always making their modest income stretch to cover what they needed. In 1883, Caleb's mother came to visit. It was the first time she had seen him since he left Nebraska, and the reunion was emotional. She held him for a long time, crying into his shoulder, telling him how much she had missed him. Then she turned to Josephine, and for a moment Caleb held his breath, unsure how this would go. "You are the one who stole my son," his mother said. "Yes, madam," Josephine replied steadily, "and he stole me right back." His mother looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "Good. He needed stealing. That boy was carrying too much anger, too much pain. I can see you have made him happy." She opened her arms and Josephine stepped into them, and just like that, another bridge was built across an old divide. His mother stayed for 2 weeks, getting to know her grandchildren and helping around the ranch. She and Josephine grew close, sharing stories and recipes, finding common ground in their love for Caleb and his family. When she finally left to return to Nebraska, she made them promise to visit someday. "The ranch is still there," she said. "It will be yours someday, Caleb, when I am gone. I know you have built something here, but it is your birthright. I hope you will claim it." "I will think about it," Caleb promised, though he had no real intention of returning to Nebraska. Colorado was home now. This was where his family was, where his future lay. The years passed in the way that years do when life is full and busy. Thomas grew tall and strong, learning everything his father could teach him about horses and ranching. Grace was whip-smart and stubborn, constantly challenging both her parents with questions they could not always answer. In 1885, they had another son, Daniel, who was quiet and thoughtful, content to spend hours just watching the world around him. Caleb and Josephine's love deepened with time, seasoned by shared struggles and joys, by the daily work of building a life together. They still had their moments of conflict. disagreements about how to handle the children or how to spend their money, but they had learned to talk through their problems, to never let anger fester into resentment. One evening in 1888, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson, Josephine leaned her head on Caleb's shoulder and sighed contentedly. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Giving up your family's ranch, starting from nothing?" "Never," Caleb said without hesitation. "Not for a single moment. Everything we have, we built together. That means more to me than any inheritance ever could." "I regret that my father never got to know his grandchildren," Josephine admitted. "I regret that he was so consumed by hatred that he could not see past it. But I do not regret choosing you. I would make that choice again every single day." "I love you," Caleb said, kissing the top of her head. "I loved you from that first day in Valentine when you looked at me like maybe we could be more than our family's hatred. I love you now, surrounded by the life we built. And I will love you every day until my last breath." "And I will love you just as long," Josephine promised. News came in the spring of 1889 that Josephine Everett had died. Josephine received a telegram from Marcus, brief and formal, informing her of their father's passing and the funeral arrangements. She stared at the telegram for a long time, her expression unreadable. "You want to go?" Caleb asked gently. "I do not know," she admitted. "Part of me feels like I should, like it is my duty. But another part of me is still so angry with him for what he chose, for picking his pride over his daughter." "Whatever you decide, I will support you," Caleb said. "If you want to go, we will all go together. If you want to stay here, that is fine too. There is no wrong choice." In the end, Josephine decided to go, and true to his word, Caleb accompanied her. They left the children with Samuel and his wife and made the long journey back to Nebraska. It felt strange to return after so many years, to see the familiar landscape that had once been home. The funeral was well attended, all the prominent families of the county turning out to pay their respects. Caleb stood at the back with Josephine, and he could feel the stares, hear the whispers. The prodigal daughter had returned with her Porter husband. It was the scandal everyone wanted to discuss but was too polite to mention outright. Marcus saw them and came over immediately. He had aged in the years since that confrontation on the trail, lines of responsibility etched into his face. He embraced his sister tightly. "I am glad you came," he said. "I was not sure you would." "I had to," Josephine replied. "Even after everything, he was still my father." Marcus nodded, then turned to Caleb and extended his hand. "Thank you for coming with her. And for taking care of her all these years. I can see you kept your word." "Always," Caleb said, shaking his hand firmly. At the graveside, as the preacher spoke words about redemption and forgiveness, Caleb found himself thinking about his own father, buried in this same cemetery just a few hundred yards away. Two men who had once been partners, who had let their conflict destroy them both, now resting in the same ground. The irony was not lost on him. After the service, Josephine placed a single flower on her father's grave, then walked over to Caleb's father's headstone and placed one there too. "They should have been friends," she said quietly. "They should have found a way past their disagreement. Instead, they destroyed each other and hurt everyone who loved them." "But we did not repeat their mistakes," Caleb said, putting his arm around her. "We chose differently. And because we did, our children will never know this kind of pain." They stayed in Nebraska for a week, staying with Marcus at the Everett Ranch. It was strange being there in the house that had been Josephine's childhood home, but also healing in its way. Marcus had taken over running the ranch and was doing well with it. He had married and had 3 children of his own, and watching his children play with Josephine, Caleb could see the warmth that had always existed beneath the family's hard exterior. On their last night, Marcus and Caleb sat on the porch sharing a bottle of whiskey. For a long time they did not speak, just sat in comfortable silence watching the stars. "I was wrong about you," Marcus said finally. "When I caught up to you on that trail, I thought you were just taking advantage of my sister's rebellious nature. I thought you were using her to hurt our family, but I can see now that you genuinely love her. More than anything in this world," Caleb confirmed. "Our fathers were fools," Marcus continued. "They let their pride turn disagreement into violence and violence into tragedy. The whole county suffered for it. When I took over the ranch, I made a decision. No more feuds. No more carrying on conflicts for the sake of honor or tradition. Life is too short for that kind of hatred." "I am glad to hear it," Caleb said. "For what it is worth, I forgive your father, not because what he did was right, but because holding on to anger was poisoning me. Josephine taught me that. She taught me that love is stronger than hatred every single time." "She always was the smart one," Marcus said with a slight smile. He turned to look at Caleb directly. "The Porter Ranch, your family's land, it sits next to ours. Your mother is getting older, and from what I hear, she is thinking about selling it. If you ever wanted to come back to reclaim what should be yours, I would support it. In fact, I would welcome it. Our children could grow up together, the way our fathers should have been able to work together." Caleb considered this, turning it over in his mind. "That is generous of you, Marcus, but Colorado is home now. We have built a life there, put down roots. I do not think we will be coming back to Nebraska." "I understand, but the offer stands now and always. You are family, whether our fathers wanted to acknowledge it or not." When Caleb and Josephine finally returned to Colorado, it felt like coming home in a way Nebraska never quite had. Their children ran out to greet them, full of stories about their adventures with Samuel's family, and Caleb felt his heart swell with gratitude for this life they had built. The ranch continued to prosper over the following years. Thomas proved to have his father's gift with horses, and by the time he was 18, he was handling most of the training himself. Grace surprised everyone by showing an aptitude for business, taking over more and more of the ranch's financial management, and proving to have a shrewd mind for negotiation and contracts. In 1895, Caleb's mother passed away peacefully in her sleep. She had come to visit Colorado regularly over the years, had become a beloved grandmother to the children, and her loss was felt deeply by the whole family. In her will, she left the Nebraska ranch to Caleb, along with a letter urging him to do whatever felt right with it, whether that meant selling it or keeping it in the family. After much discussion, Caleb and Josephine decided to keep the ranch but lease it to Marcus for management. It seemed fitting somehow, the Porter and Everett ranches finally working together instead of in opposition. The steady income from the lease helped them expand their Colorado operation, buying more land and building better facilities. Their children grew and started families of their own. Thomas married a kind-hearted schoolteacher and settled on a portion of the Colorado ranch, building a house just over the hill from his parents. Grace shocked everyone by marrying a lawyer from Denver and moving into the city, though she still returned regularly to help manage the ranch's business affairs. Daniel, true to his quiet nature, became a veterinarian and split his time between Colorado and Wyoming, caring for animals across the region. As Caleb and Josephine grew older, they spent more time simply enjoying each other's company. They would sit on their porch in the evenings, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, and marvel at how their one choice, that decision to choose love over hatred, had blossomed into this beautiful, complicated, wonderful family. One evening in 1902, as they sat watching another Colorado sunset, Caleb took Josephine's hand and brought it to his lips. 26 years, he said. 26 years since we rode out of Nebraska together, scared and hopeful and desperately in love. The best 26 years of my life, Josephine replied. She had aged gracefully, her auburn hair now streaked with silver, her face lined with the marks of laughter and hard work. To Caleb, she was more beautiful than ever. Do you remember what you said to me that day at the creek? When I told you about my father arranging my marriage, I said a lot of things that day. You said that love was the only thing strong enough to break the cycle of violence and hatred. You were right, Caleb. We broke that cycle. Our children never knew the poison of grudges and feuds. They grew up surrounded by love and acceptance. That is our legacy, more valuable than any amount of land or money. Our legacy is you, Caleb said. Your courage to choose your own path, your strength to stand by that choice even when it was hard. I just followed where you led. We led each other, Josephine corrected gently. That is what partnerships are. That is what love is. Two people choosing each other every single day, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. In 1905, Marcus came to visit Colorado for the first time. He was nearing 60 now, his hair completely gray, but his eyes still held that sharp intelligence. He spent a week with them, and it was remarkable how easy it was, how the years had softened all the old tensions and conflicts. They were just family now, bonded not by the grudges of the past but by genuine affection and respect. I wish Father could have known this, Marcus said one night over dinner, surrounded by the combined chaos of Caleb and Josephine's extended family. He died angry and alone, cut off from his daughter and grandchildren because he could not let go of his pride. What a waste! He made his choices, Josephine said. We cannot carry his regrets for him. All we can do is make different choices, better choices, and hope that eventually changes the pattern. It did change the pattern, Marcus said. Look around this table. Porters and Everetts breaking bread together, laughing together. Our fathers would be shocked. Or maybe, if they were honest with themselves, maybe they would be relieved. Maybe they would be grateful that their children found a way to end what they could not. As the years continued to pass, Caleb and Josephine settled into the rhythms of older age. They were still active, still involved with the ranch, but they also knew when to step back and let the younger generation take the lead. Thomas had proven himself more than capable, and with Grace managing the business side and Daniel providing veterinary services, the ranch was in good hands. In the spring of 1908, Caleb and Josephine celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. Their children organized a large party, inviting friends and family from across Colorado and Nebraska. It was a joyous occasion, filled with music and dancing and laughter. As Caleb danced with his wife under the stars, holding her close and swaying to the music, he thought about that young cowboy who had helped a woman with a crate in Valentine all those years ago. He had been so angry then, so weighed down by his father's death and the expectations of his family. He could never have imagined that one simple act of kindness would lead to this, to a lifetime of love and happiness. "What are you thinking about?" Josephine asked, looking up at him. "How lucky I am," Caleb said simply. "How grateful I am that you took a chance on me that day at the creek. How thankful I am for every moment we have had together." "I am the lucky one," Josephine replied. "You showed me that it was possible to choose my own path, to be brave enough to claim my own happiness. You gave me everything I did not even know I wanted." "We gave it to each other," Caleb said, echoing her words from years ago. "That is what love is. Choosing each other, building together, facing whatever comes side by side." They danced until the stars wheeled overhead and the music finally stopped, and then they walked hand in hand back to their house. comfortable in the silence that comes with decades of companionship. The ranch continued to thrive, expanding and modernizing while still maintaining the values that Caleb and Josephine had built it on. Honesty, hard work, compassion, and the belief that love was always stronger than hatred. Their grandchildren grew up hearing the story of how their grandparents had defied their families to be together, and it became a foundational myth for the whole family, a reminder of what was possible when people chose courage over fear. In 1912, Josephine fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. Caleb barely left her side, sitting by her bed and reading to her, holding her hand, refusing to accept that after all they had been through together, illness might separate them. She recovered slowly, but the experience shook them both, a reminder that their time together, however blessed, was not infinite. "When I was sick," Josephine said one day after she had regained her strength, "I kept thinking about that first kiss at the creek. Do you remember? How scared we both were, how impossible it all seemed." "I remember," Caleb said. "I remember thinking that I would rather have one moment of truth with you than a lifetime of playing it safe." "We got more than one moment," Josephine said softly. "We got thousands of moments, years of moments, a whole lifetime of choosing each other. Not everyone gets that, Caleb. We are blessed beyond measure." "I know." He pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, "and I am grateful for every single day." They had many more days together. Years, in fact. They saw their grandchildren marry and start families of their own. They celebrated the ranch's 50th anniversary, an occasion that brought people from all across the region to honor what Caleb and Josephine had built. They grew old together, their bodies slower but their love as strong as ever. Caleb passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1919, at the age of 67. He had been working with the horses that afternoon, doing what he loved, and when he lay down for a nap, he simply did not wake up. Josephine found him there, looking peaceful, and though her heart shattered into a million pieces, she also felt a strange sense of gratitude. He had lived well, loved well, and died doing what brought him joy. The funeral was enormous, a testament to the life he had lived and the people he had touched. Cowboys from across Colorado and Nebraska came to pay their respects. His children and grandchildren spoke about his kindness, his integrity, his unwavering commitment to doing what was right even when it was hard. Josephine stood at his graveside and spoke last. Her voice was steady, though tears streamed down her face. "Caleb Porter showed me what it meant to be brave," she said. "He taught me that love is not just a feeling, it is a choice you make every single day. He chose me when it would have been easier to walk away. He chose our family when his own family rejected him. He chose forgiveness when he had every right to hold onto anger. And every single day for 37 years, he chose to love me with everything he had. That is the legacy he leaves behind, not just for our family, but for everyone who knew him. Love is always worth fighting for. Love always wins in the end." Josephine lived for 6 more years after Caleb's death. She remained active in the ranch, spending time with her ever-growing family and working to preserve the story of their love for future generations. She wrote it all down in a leather journal, every detail she could remember, so that their great-grandchildren and beyond would know what their ancestors had sacrificed and achieved. She passed away in her sleep in the spring of 1925, surrounded by family, at the age of 71. They buried her next to Caleb, and on the shared headstone, Thomas had inscribed a simple message: "Caleb and Josephine Porter." They chose love over hatred and built a legacy that will last forever. The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story, but never forgetting the foundation that Caleb and Josephine had laid. The feud between the Porters and Everetts became ancient history, a cautionary tale told to children about the dangers of holding grudges. But more importantly, their love story became a beacon of hope, a reminder that no divide is too great to bridge, no hatred too deep to overcome. All it takes is two people brave enough to choose each other, to fight for what matters, and to believe that love is the most powerful force in the world. Years turned into decades, and the world changed dramatically. The Wild West faded into memory, replaced by modern conveniences and changing social norms. But on a ranch in Colorado, the story of a cowboy and the daughter of his enemy lived on, told and retold, cherished and celebrated. Thomas's children grew up hearing about their grandparents' courage. They learned that family was not just about blood, but about the bonds you chose to forge. They understood that love required sacrifice and bravery, but that it was always worth it in the end. Grace's daughter became a writer and turned her grandparents' story into a novel that became a regional bestseller in the 1950s, introducing their tale to an even wider audience. People wrote letters saying how the story had inspired them to bridge their own divides, to reach across political or social or familial rifts, and choose connection over separation. Daniel's son became a historian and carefully preserved all of Josephine's journals and letters, along with documents and photographs from that era. He donated them to the Colorado Historical Society, ensuring that future generations would have access to this primary source material about life in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The ranch itself became something of a landmark. People would stop by, wanting to see where Caleb and Josephine had built their life together. The family eventually started offering tours, using the opportunity to share not just their personal history, but the broader history of the American West, with all its complexity and conflict. In 1976, on the centennial of Caleb and Josephine's marriage, the family organized a massive reunion. Descendants came from all across the country, Porters and Everetts mingling freely, connected by the love story that had united their families a century before. They gathered at the ranch and shared stories, looked at old photographs, and marveled at the legacy that two brave young people had created. The oldest living descendant at that reunion was 93 years old, a granddaughter who had known Caleb and Josephine personally. She stood before the assembled crowd and shared her memories. "I was just a girl when grandfather Caleb died," she said, her voice wavering but strong. "But I remember him clearly. He was tall and kind, and he always had time for us children. He would lift me up onto the horses and teach me how to brush their manes. And grandmother Josephine would bake cookies and tell us stories about the old days, about when she and grandfather first fell in love. What I remember most was how they looked at each other. Even when they were old, even after decades of marriage, they would look at each other like they were still those young people meeting by a creek. Like every day together was a gift they did not take for granted. They taught us all that love is not just about the easy times. It is about standing together when the world tells you to stand apart. It is about choosing kindness when anger would be simpler. It is about building something that lasts, something that extends beyond your own lifetime. We are all here today because two people decided that love was more important than hatred, because they believed that their future mattered more than the past. That is the greatest gift they gave us, and I hope we honor it by living the same way. The reunion ended with a celebration that lasted well into the night, filled with music and dancing and joy. And if the spirits of Caleb and Josephine were watching from wherever they had gone, they must have been pleased to see the fruits of their courage, the family they had created through their brave choice to love across enemy lines. The ranch still operates today, now in its sixth generation of family management. The original house that Caleb and Josephine built has been carefully preserved, maintained as a museum and reminder of where it all began. New buildings have been added over the years, modern facilities for a modern ranching operation, but the heart of the place remains unchanged. Visitors who come to the ranch often comment on the feeling of peace that pervades the property. They say it feels like a place where love won, where hope triumphed over despair. They stand in the small room where Caleb and Josephine spent their first night as husband and wife, and they can almost feel the presence of that young couple, so afraid and so hopeful, beginning their journey together. The story of Caleb Porter and Josephine Everett has become more than just family history. It has become a testament to the power of individual choice, to the possibility of breaking free from inherited conflicts, to the truth that love is indeed stronger than hatred. Their story reminds people that we are not bound by the mistakes of our ancestors, that every generation has the opportunity to choose differently, to build bridges instead of walls. In the end, what they proved is simple but profound. Love is not just an emotion or a fleeting feeling. Love is a decision, a commitment, a daily choice to put someone else's well-being alongside your own. It is choosing to see the humanity in someone you were taught to hate. It is having the courage to stand up to your family, your community, your entire world, and say that some things matter more than tradition or pride or revenge. Caleb and Josephine's love story did not erase the tragedy that came before it. Caleb's father still died. The years of conflict between the families still happened. But their choice to love each other despite that history, to refuse to let hatred define their future, created something new and beautiful. It broke the cycle and gave their children, and their children's children, a different legacy to carry forward. That legacy lives on in every descendant who chooses compassion over conflict, who extends a hand across a divide, who believes that change is possible. It lives on in the ranch itself, thriving and successful, built on the foundation of two people's brave choice. And it lives on in the countless people who have heard their story and felt inspired to write their own chapters of courage and love. The sun still sets over the Colorado mountains the same way it did when Caleb and Josephine watched it together all those years ago. The creek still runs through the property, marking boundaries that no longer matter. And if you stand in the right spot at the right time, you can almost hear the echo of their voices, laughing together, planning their future, choosing each other again and again and again. That is the true ending of their story. Not death or loss or the passage of time, but the eternal truth they discovered and shared. That love, real love, the kind that requires courage and sacrifice and daily choice, that love never truly ends. It ripples outward through generations, touching lives that will never know the original source but will benefit from its power nonetheless. Caleb and Josephine chose love over hatred. They chose each other over their family's ancient grudge. And in doing so, they created a legacy that will endure as long as people believe in the power of love to transform, to heal, and to conquer even the deepest divisions. Their story stands as proof that no matter how impossible it seems, no matter how great the obstacles, love can find a way. Love can build a bridge. Love can change everything. And that is the greatest gift they left behind.